Well, we ended off last week with our time period, and we got through it. And now we're moving on to the purpose of 1 Timothy. And we're in the historical section. And one important lesson in 1 Timothy is the proper view for us to take concerning our money and our material things. I was going to mention it later on in this lesson, but just to remind us, Ephesus was a super wealthy city at that time. There was a lot of wealthy people in it, a lot of trade, commerce. So the people that lived there obviously had money for that time in the centuries. And so the Ephesian brethren certainly wouldn't have had the material gadgets that we have today. But nonetheless, they needed to learn to be content. Obviously, because Paul spends some time here looking at that. And, okay, yeah, that's all right. So our question that Dave asked us is how is the proper view of material wealth and possessions emphasized in the following passages? And I think I might have put these ones up. Yes. So we'll read the verses, and then, in a few words, we'll see what you think of as far as us being content. Gerald, I'll get you to read the first verse then.
Now, godliness with contentment is great gain.
Okay, what, as far as wealth, as far as our daily possessions go, what does this verse tell you? Good.
It's putting the emphasis of being godly.
Right? Okay. And so, how does that affect our attitude towards our possessions?
Well, it goes in a context, Timothy is being told that others are being greedy and seeking out to get gain in a wrong way, whereas he's to be content. Godliness with contentment is great gain. And so doesn't matter our station in life, whether we are wealthy or whether we are not.
Right.
We are to be content.
Right.
We often think of contentment, those lower people, they need to be content with what they have. Well, the wealthier people need to be content with what they have too. And whatever station of life we're in, we need to be godly with contentment.
Right. Exactly. I mean, we all know it's a struggle, paying our bills and buying the things that we need. But if we don't look at our godliness, if we don't try and be content with that, then the struggle's going to get out of hand, isn't it? And sooner or later, it'll overwhelm you, and our godliness will be put behind us. We won't consider that. And verse 7 then, or verse 8, Gord, please.
And having food and clothing, with these we shall be content.
Okay, what jumps out at you here? We see a contrast here.
It brings up the idea. Sorry. I was just going to say, it brings up the idea of the difference between needs and wants. So if we have what we need, then we should be content. But often we want more things than we actually
Okay, right, Tim. Carla?
No, but basically in life, we just need food, clothing, and shelter. I mean, if we have food, we are covered and a shelter.
R-
Those are the main things that that necessities of life. And I guess if we don't have those, it's not going to be a nice thing. But when we have those, we should be content. The
R-
basics.
Right, right. I thought the necessities of life here are standing in contrast with the gain that the false teachers were trying to get at that time in the preceding verses. Those who will be rich in the following verses, and contentment is not found in excess of materials.
I find interesting that shelter actually isn't mentioned in verse 8.
Uh,
Food and clothing is. Food, we like as far as the necessities, we can't live without food and water. And God has told us we need to be covered. So in other words, we can't walk around with no clothing on. But if we have no home, I find it interesting we can still be content. Because we often in Western society, well, if we have a home, we're good. Well, yes, if we have a home, like as far as we're blessed. But if we don't, we can still be content if we have food and clothing.
Right. That's interesting. Jerry, you picked that out. That's true. Jeff?
Are you going back to verse 7?
Yes. I'm going to see what happened here. We'll
Okay.
have to read it.
Because that helps with verse 8 too.
Yes.
Okay. Actually, if you want, Jeff, let me just see here. No.
No.
Huh. No.
Oh,
There it is. I don't know why it didn't come up when we clicked, but so what were you saying now again about?
well, I mean, it helps obviously with verse 8, for we brought nothing into this world, it is certain we can carry nothing out. So that helps us have a proper frame of mind. We know what is enough for contentment because these things are not permanent.
Right.
It's not the spiritual things that are eternal. Temporary earthly things. We can do without them.
Yes.
And food and clothing is enough.
Right.
In verse 17, which we'll get to, but it refers to riches as uncertain. Uncertain riches. That's what the world provides, things that you can't count on. But Paul says it's certain we can carry them. That's what's certain. You can't hold on to these things.
Exactly.
Come in with nothing, leave with nothing.
Yeah. That's teaching us that happiness is within, isn't it? And not without. Material gain shouldn't be our primary goal in life, should it? I thought of I asked Sandy one time what her favorite song was, and it was "Earth Holds No Treasure, but Perish with Using." Really, that should be our ultimate goal. Carla?
But Jesus said, foxes have holes, birds have nests,
It-
but the Son of Man has no place to rest his head. Probably it's because, I don't know if we could, sometimes if we go somewhere and all, but people might kick you out too. They wouldn't want you, they would think you're a freeloader or whatever. But, I mean, Jesus said that, so I guess we have to be content with, we could make out anyhow, somehow, and
Right.
I'm
That's
just
yeah.
saying, he said that, so.
There are, our daily lives are filled with struggles, and we all pay bills, we all pay taxes, rent. So yeah, we have to do the best we can to get through those situations. But when we are not content, when we don't teach ourselves, that's the way it is. It's the way of the world. If you don't strive to be content with what God has given us and our hope of the future, then our faith what's going to happen to it? It's going to be wrecked. And I thought of, many use, the same as we're seeing in Timothy, many use religion as a way to gain material wealth. And we need to be careful. We see that in the denominational world. It's our TV evangelists are all millionaires. And they're teaching us that if God loves us, He'll bless us with wealth and money. That's not the case, is it? They have it because people are giving them the money, but we're to be content. So we move on then. We did verse 8, so we'll go to 9 and 10. Carla, can you read that, please?
But those who desire to be rich fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and harmful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition. But the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil, from which some have strayed from the faith in their greediness, and pierced themselves through with many sorrows.
Okay. What is emphasized here? What do you see here? Is this verse telling us that, we think of the Thessalonians that were thinking of believing that Christ had already come or was coming in the near future, so they were quitting working, they weren't taking care of business. Is that how we are to look at things? Reading this verse, what do you see here? Think about
say that having money is evil. It's when you make it a priority in your life about God, serving God, that it's evil.
Right, Gore.
Or your fellow man, or helping others. I mean, there's a lot of people that have lots of money and do a lot of good things. They help people that are less fortunate. There's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But when you're taking it from God, the time and oh well, you know what, I'm gonna work extra just to make more money instead of serving God. It's a little bit different.
Right. I saw here that the desire to be wealthy is not a passing emotional thing. It's a result of a process of reasoning. We do. I think Tammy and I like watching Shark Tank and the investors on there. It is a sharp reality that we've realized that these people, their whole goal is $1, and they don't care about anything else. It's just simply money, and they will not invest unless they can make as much as they can. But it's just a reminder to us that, yes, we have to work. Sure, we like to save money for trips, holidays, whatever. But when you wake up with that desire, the first thing in your mind of making money, it's hardly Christian-like.
I said it's contrast going to what the Lord said. There's a contrast in 2 Thessalonians about not working because you think you're going to be, well, as far as they think, well, Christ is coming. And so it might appear more godly not to work. And then Timothy, it's spending all your time working, like as far as to obtain riches. Where 2 Thessalonians taught us that we work to provide our needs. Whereas the desire to be rich, and it's not wrong, yes, to be rich. But as Solomon taught us in Ecclesiastes, you're not going to find happiness there. You think you will. But if the desire just is to be rich, when you get what we might consider rich now, it doesn't appear rich to you then, and then you want the next one, and then the next level.
Right.
And so it's never-ending cycles, the desire to be rich. So and we can fall into a lot of troubles. The rich have different temptations than we do. We all have temptations, but the rich can get themselves into a lot of trouble because they're rich and they don't trust in God.
Well,
Trust in
exactly.
themselves.
Yeah. It becomes your goal, doesn't it, in life? So we'll move on then to our next books. Our next. Yes. This is our last verse. Jeff, do you want to read that? Can you see that?
Did we just do those?
Not this one.
Not this one, no. We did 9 and 10.
Oh, right. Sure.
Yeah.
Command those who are rich in this present age not to be haughty, nor to trust in uncertain riches, but in the living God who gives us richly all things to enjoy. Let them do good, that they be rich in good works, ready to give, willing to share, storing up for themselves a good foundation for the time to come, that they may lay hold on eternal life.
Okay. I just mentioned a minute ago that Ephesus was one of the wealthiest cities of that day, and it's likely that a few of the wealthy were in the church. There would be business owners, and they would have been wealthy. And it seems that Paul has a great deal to say about the rich in the world here. I found that interesting because he's writing this letter to Timothy. Timothy is the evangelist of the church. Timothy's preparing lessons, seeing things that need to be preached on, and Paul mentions a lot about possessions in this book, which made me wonder, well, it was a wealthy city. Maybe some of the members were wealthy, and there is in our world even a most real and effective power, isn't it? Possessions and money. And it needs to be looked at and thought about. Chair?
And we see here what the good of riches can do.
Yes.
They are uncertain, yes. So, like as far as if we have them, we need to use them properly, not for our own good necessarily, but to provide for those who don't have. Like as far as if we have nobody who is wealthy, then the poor are not going to be helped at all because no one's able to help.
Right.
But who are the ones to help the poor? Those who are wealthy. And we see that even in the world today, where you have some people who are very wealthy and they're very benevolent to other people. They're not ones to hold on to their money. They are involved in charities that actually do good work, and so there is a purpose of riches that doesn't lead to problems.
Right.
And so if we say, well, it's not wrong to be rich, then we need to focus on verses 18 and 19. What should we be doing with our riches if we have them?
Right. Right. The whole reason that we guard against the world's thinking of riches, and the rich actually, the thought of being arrogant and prideful, greedy, the rich face this temptation more than others. You know, if we get by weekly, then we're not really pressed with that kind of temptation, as opposed to if we were real wealthy and had lots of money, then the temptations are going to be there in front of us. You know, we may want more than what we should really want and what we really need. So we need as Christians to guard against that with all our might. Jeff?
The word godliness appears in this book about 9 times.
It-
So it tells me that Paul wants us to understand that God is our standard. Godliness is our standard. When we look at these verses, talking about those who are rich, who's more rich than God? Yet God gives. Like it says here, let them do good. God does good with his riches. He's rich in good works. He gives.
Yep.
He shares. So who's our standard? Who we follow? We follow God's pattern, God's standard.
Right.
Even though our riches are, of course, nothing compared to
Yeah.
spiritual riches, but we should use them in the same pattern.
Exactly. And we need to understand then ourselves what are riches to us. The fact that we've found the forgiveness of sins, the fact that we have a faithful God that's promised us eternity in heaven. We gain everything here upon this earth, and we're faced with that loss for eternity. It's going to be a stark reminder to us. Kala?
So, and then the verse it says it is more blessed to give than to receive.
Yep.
So give is blessed, in the sense that you're going to give you give him to a worthy cause. And then when you guys do the collection about giving, there's a manner to give without necessity or grudgingly. Don't give grudgingly or out of necessity, for God loves a cheerful giver.
Yeah,
So if we follow those guidelines, we'll be okay.
exactly. Yeah. And consider what God's given us. So we'll move on then. And we come into the section, the purpose of Jesus Christ. And Dave asks us, what key facts concerning Jesus Christ are presented in the following passages? And I don't think I put these up, no. These ones we'll have to open our Bibles to. I kind of skimped on my time this week and I didn't put all the passages up, but that's all right. 1 Timothy 1 and verse 15 is our first verse. Sandra, do you have that, please?
This is a faithful saying and worthy of all acceptance, that Christ Jesus came into the world to save sinners, of whom I am chief.
Okay. And these aren't complicated questions. Just quickly, what jumps out at you here? What facts about Christ jump out at you here?
Jesus came into the world to save sinners.
The which?
Jesus came into the world to save sinners.
Exactly, yeah. And what does that show us? I thought of that one. What does that show us? What do some people think about salvation? Is it a big deal? Some don't think it's a big deal, do they? But this shows us that man is lost, doesn't it? What was the need of Christ? If we weren't lost, then why would Jesus even think of dying upon the cross and suffering? So for those that maybe think, well, it's not a big deal, well, this verse shows us that it is, doesn't it? That we're lost without Christ. And our next verse, chapter 2, and verse 5 to 6. 5 to 6. Henry, do you want to read that, please?
Yeah.
Have you got it?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay.
And there is one God, one mediator between God and man, the man Christ Jesus, to give himself a ransom for all, to be testified in two times.
Okay, what's the first thing that jumps out to you here about Jesus? Right. He was a mediator. Okay. What else do we see?
There's only one, no other. People seem to feel there's many different paths you can take, they say. Choose the one that suits you.
Right.
There's only one.
Yeah, exactly. So we've got the only one in the form of the mediator. And who's he mediating between?
God and man, everyone says.
Right. God and man. And what does it say right at the beginning about Jesus? What do we think?
Well, I was noticing the contrast between God and man. Of course, we're talking about God the Father here.
Right.
But how did Jesus become mediator? He became man.
Right.
Like as far as it's the man Jesus Christ. Well, why did Paul say that? Because Jesus is God too. Well, he said it because that's how Jesus became the mediator. He came to this earth to die for our sins, and now he can mediate between us and the Father.
Right.
Whereas before he died, like as far as when we sinned, we were separated from God. There was no mediator in that sense. And so that's something we need to remember.
Right. Somebody else had their hand up? No? So he is God, and he's in the form of the mediator because he lived sinlessly. So the plan was that he be the ransom. He be the sacrifice for us. And through that sacrifice, he paid the price to show, and it's shown, it testified at that point when he died upon Calvary for our sins. And our next verse, chapter 3, and verse 16. 3 and 16. Tim, do you want to read that, please?
And without controversy, great is the history of godliness. God was manifested in the flesh, justified in the spirit, seen by angels, preached among the Gentiles, believed on in the world, received up in glory.
Okay. What do we see here? What is shown to us again, I guess I could say?
It's talking about God's glory.
Victoria, eh?
It's talking about God's glory.
Oh, sorry.
God's glory. It's talking about
I'm going to
God's
turn
glory.
this fan off, okay? Until
Turn
we're
it off
done.
until later.
Yeah, I'll turn it back on because I can't hear. That helps. Okay, what was that again?
It talks about God's glory.
Oh, okay. Now that I flustered myself with that fan. So, okay, it's again we see that he was manifested in the flesh. He was seen by angels. He was believed on in the world. And the thought about great is the mystery of godliness. What does that bring to your mind? Just some thoughts. Remember what Tim's version said, without controversy? The American Standard says, beyond question, great is the mystery of godliness.
Mystery would be like hidden truth.
Yes.
So the idea being is godliness is not something we know.
Right.
It has to be something revealed to us.
R-
It's sad when people think they know the mind of God without actually hearing from God.
Right.
It's not possible.
No, that's a good point. Any other thoughts on that? My thought was just simply imagine that God would have been willing to die for me, his creation. That, to my thinking, that's unbelievable. It's a mystery for me to try and figure that out. But knowing that, understanding that, now, that creates within me a humbleness, and an astounding fact that, God would have created me, and while I turned my back upon him, he'd still desire that we change. We think of projects that we do and make just something silly, like something we build. If it doesn't work out the way we want it, we throw it out. It's like, forget it. And I'm not even going to bother retrying. And yet, when we think about God being willing to do that, Jeff?
Because God has revealed to us not only through his words, but through his actions, what he's done.
Right.
The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit have done, reveals them to us. We cannot understand those things until we see them and hear them.
Right. That's how we strive to understand love, isn't it? And I think that's part of our reason remembering Christ around his memorial every first day of the week. It just reminds us and amazed that the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, would have went through that humiliation, that physical pain and agony for us. It should move us, really, shouldn't it, to a deeper sense of appreciation. So any other thoughts?
In Deuteronomy 29:29,
Yes?
the secret things belong unto Jehovah our God, but the things that are revealed belong unto us and to our children forever, that we may do all the words of his law.
Good point. Good verse, Mitchie. Yeah, that's right. I was thinking, of Israel and it's in our reading this morning, the sacrifices they continually gave, and the reminder that they would get from that. A lot of Jeremy's podcasts brought that point out, and I've often thought, we don't do that, but God desires that from our hearts, daily, constantly, that we should offer our sacrifices of thankfulness to him. We're not, word escapes me now, but we don't do those sacrifices. We don't, those ordinances continually, but that doesn't mean we just forget it. And when we have time to remember God, sure. Oh. So we'll move on then, no other thoughts in that section, and we come to the content now of 1 Timothy, and we're going to look at departures from the faith. And Dave asks us the question, how does Paul instruct Timothy to deal with the threat of false doctrine in the following passages? We'll go back to, I think we've got a few minutes 1:45 the bell goes?
Well, it'll ring in 2 minutes, and then it'll give you 2 more. So.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll read. We'll go back to 1 Timothy 1 and verse 3. And he's speaking here to Timothy. And he says, just as I urged you upon my departure for Macedonia to remain on at Ephesus, so that you would instruct certain people not to teach strange doctrine. So what do you see here? How's Paul helping Timothy? How's he encouraging Timothy to deal with false doctrine?
He's to charge them. We've read that already in a few places, that he is to charge people.
Right.
He is to tell people, proclaim the gospel. There's no other gospel. And you need to stop teaching.
Right. I thought of what's the action of a teacher? What is his duty? I guess is another word.
Teach the word.
The which, Jeff?
Teach the word.
Okay. Instruction. James?
And impart knowledge to other people, you know?
Right. Yeah. He's to direct, isn't he? And he is to command. That's what Timothy's job was, the Apostle Paul. And the instruction, that is their duty. And so Paul is encouraging. And I found it interesting that Paul said, just as I urged you. And maybe Timothy had other plans. Maybe he didn't want to stay at Ephesus. I don't know. But Paul here sees the need. So he's impressing upon Timothy. That is your duty. Sure.
Especially when we get to 2 Timothy.
Yes.
Timothy is a man who needs encouraging. Because as an evangelist, so often we can get discouraged.
Yes.
We see the fault, we see the problems more than maybe others do. We're always up standing for the truth, getting others to try to do that, and sometimes people won't do that. And so 2 Timothy is going to show us that Timothy needed help to keep going on. It's not that he stopped, it's just he needed encouragement too. Well, 1 Timothy's encouraging him, preach. Make sure you preach.
Right. Yeah. We've often said that, even in your sermons, to point out error is a challenge for the one pointing it out. It's a challenge for the one hearing it, too, because there's a change. But the challenge for the one that has to voice that and let others know, that takes not only courage, but it takes encouragement to do that.
And nobody wants to be told, really.
No.
Whether you say it nicely or in a manner looking out for the person's best interest, people don't want to hear it sometimes.
Right.
And that's why I guess Paul is urging Timothy. Like it's like almost like I'm pleading or begging you to do this because it's so important not to teach.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, those of us that are parents, we know the challenge of pointing out correction with our children. Those of us that are children know the feeling of not wanting to accept that too.
I'm not ashamed to own my Lord, nor